Listen Up Maryland, presented by Dempsey's and Sportsland. Alongside, it's a very special guest, Ryan Renner, Phil Vassar. We have Maria Marino from SNY Sports today. I was going to say this morning, Ryan. My schedule's all turned off. Maria, welcome to the show. We cannot thank you enough for coming on with us this evening. Ryan and I have been looking forward to this for a long time. It means a lot to us. So thank you very much and welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thanks for being patient. I know you had gotten in touch with me a little before NCAA tournament time, and I was hopeful to join you guys, and things got a little crazy schedule-wise, but that's okay. It gives us an excuse to catch up in the off season.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Ryan, the way to work, I guess, Ryan, if you want to alternate, Ryan has some questions for you. We're going to start out, if you don't mind, put the spotlight on you just for a second, because we appreciate you so much for coming on. Ryan, if you want to start out, and then I will take over.
Yeah, I can start out with the first question. So I was researching you a little bit, obviously, writing my notes down. And I saw in an article that I read that you said you always had the reporter's instinct. So is that just something that, you grew up and you always thought you wanted to be a reporter, that you knew that you always wanted to do? And, how did you start your reporting career? Did it start with your love of sports? Maybe did you play a sport when you're younger? How did it start?
Well, it's a combination of things. I know that at the very beginning, I was a storyteller. I was a good writer. It wasn't until I was a junior in high school, I took a journalism class, and that kind of set everything in motion for me. That's kind of when I realized that I wanted to tell stories for a living. I always loved sports, but the idea of actually working in sports didn't come until later. So in the beginning, I was just focused on more writing. And when I say reporter's instinct, it was more just like a natural curiosity. It was a sort of a craving to talk to people and interview them and learn about them and share what makes them unique. So I always really enjoyed the interview process. And I think reporter's instinct is twofold. I think part of it is learned and part of it is innate.
Right.
As far as, when you're in an environment where you're covering an event of any kind, you have to be able to find what's going to make that story, what makes it important, what are the details that provide the context that people need to know about, and then how to approach different people to find out the information that you need.
Yeah.
I talk about when I report, timing is very important. And it's, again, sometimes it's, I wouldn't say lucky. I think, you have to plan to sort of be available at any time, because you just never know when you're going to bump into the person that you need to speak to. And when I'm on assignment or when I'm covering UConn games, you got to be on point at all times. And so it does take a little bit of you can't be shy.
Right.
and it takes a little bit of nerve, I think, to be able to approach people, to ask questions and to find out what you need.
Yeah. To be honest with you, Maria, I look up to you. Very, very personal here, because again, I talked to you before we came on, and as you probably saw, I'm in the process of hopefully going to University of Maryland for a sports journalism program. So to have you on, I mean, it's a lot of personal stuff along with my life and where I've gone and where I'm trying to get to. So again, that's why I thank you so much for coming on with us, as we will dive into UConn women's basketball here in just a second. But again, putting the spotlight more on you for just a second. I'm sure a lot of people, when they see this video, are familiar with your face up there around UConn and around the northern part, but down here around the East Coast, around Maryland. That's why I wanted to introduce you. And for people that do not know you all too well down here. But again, Ryan, I talked to you about this. I feel like it was just meant to be, with her and I and you coming on today, because I read an article. It was back like in July of 2021 on NorthJersey.com. And it has said it wasn't easy for you to get to where you are right now, but you made it. You made it with SNY. And with that said, with you, Ryan and I want to be that change, be part of that change for women's sports, women's basketball. And Ryan hit hard on this. He's like, Phil, you got to make sure you ask her about this. Just how much does it mean to you? And again, back before we started this podcast, we're going to do a little bit of everything, baseball, football. Nothing really took off. But again, we decided, as far as with Sailor Poffenberger, the senior that had graduated last year out of Middletown High School, she was a commit to UConn. So that's where we just started to cover UConn women's basketball. And we decided, well, we might as well start talking about that a little bit more. And it took off from there. So again, so to have you on, it means a whole lot, but talk a little bit about how much that changes, and you're starting to see women's basketball specifically really rise up to the occasion.
Well, firstly, thank you for the kind words. And I'm glad that you landed on UConn women's basketball and college basketball in general as a niche. And, UConn, I think, has been a bit of the exception when it comes to women's sports, because they've been so successful and they've built an empire and they're so popular. And especially in the Northeast, there's so much respect and recognition. And a lot of that has to do with Gino Auriemma and Chris Daly and the rest of the staff and the program that they built. But I personally have been covering women's basketball in some form since, I want to say, 2017 or so. So it's been a good 5 years. And it's interesting. I was always a basketball fan. When I was like in my 20s, I became like obsessed with the NBA, and I watched it insatiably. Funny enough, my earliest sports memories are of men's college basketball. My older siblings were fans of Duke, so they kind of bred me to watch those blue blood games.
Yeah.
And so I always loved it. I played basketball in high school, but not seriously. Like I said before, I kind of knew that I wanted to cover, I knew that I wanted to be a journalist, I should say. And so I didn't necessarily try to pursue sports beyond high school, playing wise. I mean, I play recreationally, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm still, active, but I wasn't trying to play in college. But when I first started covering WNBA, it was my supervisor at the time brought it to me. And to be honest, I didn't know a lot about it. I hadn't really covered I hadn't really followed it. And what I found when I started watching it and paying attention was that it was really great ball. And I just respected it so much. And I just remember seeing, like, one of the first clips I saw or games I saw, like Candace Parker just whipping the ball around with this court vision and palming the basketball. And I was like, wow, this is like impressive. And like, how was I not like into this? But at that time, it was so hard to find information about WNBA. Like, I would be talking about it every day on like digital videos, and I would really have to search for information. Now, in the last few years, we've seen a real steady growth in women's basketball media, where now there's all kinds of writers, there's all kinds of podcasts and different sources that you can get information, people on Twitter, like. And I think that's what struck me the most when I first started covering it, was like, how come I can't find out, who's playing? How come I can't find out who's been ruled out, or, and finding articles, it was just few and far between. And at the same time, I also noticed that, there was a bit, and there still is, there's a bit of a stigma out there, and especially with people online, who, I don't necessarily put much stock in their opinions, but it bothered me that women's athletes and in particular basketball players, just because that's sort of my favorite sport, we're not really getting the respect that they deserve. And I can't stand that. Like, I just don't think it's fair. And it kind of fueled me to not only continue consuming women's basketball as just a straight up fan of the sport, but also to do anything I could as a journalist to have a chance to tell those stories. And on one hand, I think it's obviously important for the advancement of the coverage, but it's also selfishly something I enjoy. I like talking about women's basketball, and I want to be able to talk about it in the same way that I talk about men's basketball. So, when you talk about women's hoops, a lot of times the conversation goes to sort of the inequity. And I think on one hand, that's very constructive. But at the same time, if you really want to respect these athletes, talk about their skills, talk about their work ethic. what they do on the court. I mean, off the court stuff is important too, especially we know in women's basketball, there's quite a bit of attention to, you know, issues beyond basketball and social justice. And that's all very, like I said, it's all very admirable. Right. But I think when we get to that point where we're talking about men's and women's basketball similarly, in the sense of respecting their skills, their achievements, their accomplishments, that's when we're going to achieve equity, because then it's not like women's basketball is different or other, you know what I mean? It's like, I was just saying this the other day, like I was thinking about like someone like Diana Taurasi, for instance, and you know, now she's one of the, I would say she's one of the women's basketball players that has certainly got a good amount of attention and sort of received a good amount of notoriety. But we still haven't scratched the surface of, like, when we talk about Diana, we don't talk about her in the same way necessarily that we talk about Kobe Bryant. And I think that is such a travesty. Yeah. Like, we should be evaluating her moves, her footwork, her, you know, shooting ability in the same way that we would have Kobe in his prime, or Kobe, you know, later in his career. And we're just starting now to do more of that. So that's something that's important to me. And I think, I hope anyway, that when you do hear me covering the sport, that's really what I'm focusing on, is these people as athletes and how impressive it is. It's not just they're not women's athletes, they are athletes.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Rod. Yeah, she couldn't have said it any better. And I appreciate you opening up to that topic, because again, like I saw in the NorthJersey.com article, it was written last year about you. You know, it stated that you had a lot of personal issues as far as, you know, women's basketball not being covered enough. And again, that's one of the reasons, a big reason why we brought you on, other than to talk about UConn women's basketball today. Because, you know, Ryan and I definitely want to be part of that change, just like you and everybody else. So we can only hope, like you said, that it grows into the future generations and they carry it on and only gets bigger.
It's happening. It's happening every year. I see it growing more and more, and it's really exciting to see. And I'm just so glad that that I've been around for it, and I'm going to be around for that growth.
Yeah, and speaking of being around, I mean, you're fairly. How many years have you actually been at SNY? It's been.
So I started at SNY as a freelancer in 2018.
Okay. And
my first winter there, so like 18, 19, I actually covered a handful of UConn men's games, like 7 or 8 games. So it was the following season, so 2019, 19, 20. That was my first season covering UConn women's basketball on the sidelines. So this is going to be, I guess I'm in year 4, if my math is correct. And unfortunately, my first season covering the team, the NCAA tournament was canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that just sucked. I mean, I was just so upset for the athletes, especially the seniors, that, and not even just in college, but in high school too. And you see that with some of the current UConn players that were in high school at the time that didn't get a chance to compete for state championships or anything like that as seniors, which just breaks my heart. Because you only get so many chances in life to win it all, to win titles, and to have one of those snatched from under you is heartbreaking. I know it's a small thing in the grand scheme of the horrors of COVID-19, but then the following season, because still during COVID, before, you know, vaccines were really a thing, I wasn't able to travel. So I covered the team. I was in studio most of the time, and, you know, I still gave it, I poured my heart and soul into it, but it wasn't quite the same. I couldn't, I didn't feel like I could be as productive or get as much information, but did what I could. And then this last season was back on the road in Connecticut at, we did SNY broadcasted, I want to say 17, 18 games, something like that. Maybe it was 15 because we had a couple of cancellations. But yeah, I did that. And that included road games as well. So it was a lot of fun to get back into that. And in addition to covering the team, I do a couple other things at SNY. I anchor Sports Night, which is a nightly recap show. I do that a couple days a week. And then I also, like in football season, I do a show called Place Your Bets on Sundays.
Okay. Yeah. But the reason going back to why I ask how many years, because I mean, if Ryan and I had to guess, I mean, you look like a true veteran standing in front of that camera. We look forward to every single interview we look forward to with Paige Beckers and all the players. So yeah, man, if we didn't know any better, I told Ryan, I said, man, if I ever get into the business, I'm afraid I would crumble under pressure, in front of that camera and the lights. But nah, he said,
well, first of all, thank you. But let me just be clear. It took me some time. I mean, as you alluded to before with the industry and sort of my journey, I mean, I didn't really get into the sports sector of media until it was like a few years after college. So I joke with people, it's not really a joke, but I make fun of myself that my first full-time job I got when I was 29 years old, because that's when SNY offered me a full-time contract. And, prior to that, I was working in the business diligently and had, multiple jobs, but it was, it was all like freelance part-time stuff. And I just strung together like 4 different outlets that I worked for. And that's what I was referring to as far as just grinding until I got to a place of a bit more security. So I don't want you to think I just stepped into SNY and was able to, be in front of the camera relatively well. It took a lot of work and it took a lot of reps.
Yeah, hard work for sure. And that's Ryan, I'll let you take over. Hard work for sure. A lot of reps, grinding it out.
Yeah.
Talking it over, switching topics to this 21-22 basketball season. Just finished up for the UConn Huskies. That's what they had to do, Maria, was grind it out. And I'm still shocked that they actually made it to the final, especially with everything they went through as far as the injuries and the illnesses that surrounded them all season. Ryan, I'll let you take it over as we switch the topic to UConn women's basketball.
Yeah, well, I mean, me and Phil have done a couple episodes so far on the upcoming recruits. Ayanna Patterson come in, Ice Brady. We're very excited for those new 2 recruits. And then, of course, the transfer, Lou Lopez. Can't wait for her to come in. I believe there's like 8 returning players to the UConn this season, new faces as well. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on the new season? What do you think about the team? I know Coach Gino, I think it's like his 38th season coaching. So what's your thoughts? Any thoughts on the new upcoming season? Because I know me and Phil can't wait till the new regular season starts.
Definitely. Well, I know that Gino is definitely high on the new recruits and the transfer Lou. And truth be told, every year coming into UConn, you're going to have great recruits. And he jokes about this all the time, that there's always the next big thing, right? So, you got somebody like, Paige Beckers or AZ Fudd, who are just superstars. And we're always want to know what's next, because it's UConn and they've sort of had that standard of just recruiting really high caliber players. And so I'm really, really excited for the new season. I think all 3 of those players that you mentioned bring something amazing to the table. And I think I'm intrigued by Lou because, because she was the MAC player of the year and she has that college experience, but it's always a little different, as a transfer, because when you come to UConn's really like nothing else. And that's something that was talked about a bit last year, especially with Dorka Juhas coming in, because she played at a really high level, D1, Ohio State, all conference in the Big Ten twice. But it was an adjustment for her coming to UConn, because UConn is extremely intense, and it's a very specific sort of system and program that they run that it sometimes takes some time. So I'm curious about that. I know I've seen clips of Ayanna Patterson dunking like nobody's business, and that's intriguing to me, only because I think sometimes when we talk about basketball, there's a little bit too much of a spotlight on dunking. So I don't want to make it seem like I think it's like the most important thing. However, I'm of the opinion that the way that we coach young women is evolving very rapidly. And I think there are some young women, and we've seen a few of them at UConn. Aubrey Griffin's another example, that have the ability to dunk the basketball, but I feel maybe necessarily have never been coached to do so. And so I'm curious, as this game continues to evolve and we see certain women's athletes, I know it's not going to be as common as on the men's side, but there are some just freak athletes on the women's side that can do that. So I just find that interesting. And I just thought that was, something worth mentioning, because I think there are people that have the ability, but they don't necessarily get the practice to be able to do it or execute it in a game. So look, it's going to be an amazing season. You mentioned, I think one of you mentioned just a little bit of the surprise of UConn last season getting to the final. And I really expect that in the next 2 years, I mean, UConn is going to win a national championship or more. Wow. Because I just don't see them having Paige Beckers in particular, and not to mention all the other great players that are growing. Mm-hmm. I just don't see them having her and not winning a title. That's the type of impact player that I think Paige is. And it's not even just her skill. Her skill is unmatched, but it's more also like her personality and her leadership capabilities, her care for her teammates. And those are the intangible things. I also think too, she's just a big game type of player. She's clutch. And she just has that ability to take over. So we know obviously she wasn't fully healthy this last postseason, and she missed most of the season with the knee surgery, which was tough. And yet, as you mentioned, getting to that final, it's a testament to the rest of the team and their ability to step up. Yeah. They had a chance to shine and improve their skills, improve their confidence, and it was really a fascinating journey of this team last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, 100% right. And Ryan and I had various discussions about that from episode to episode of what you just brought up. It's hard to imagine them not winning at least one. We understand how tough it is, don't get me wrong, but at least winning one, with Paige Beckers there. Just talk a little bit about the keys to other than Paige Beckers. We went over an episode yesterday about the three big players of returning from injuries. One of the names was Dorka Juhas, how big she was, a transfer from Ohio State, and how much bigger she will be contributing to this team during the 22 and 23 season. With that said, if they do happen to run into South Carolina again, this is thinking way into the future, but just if they get that rematch again, whether it's regular season or in the final next year, what is the big changer there as far as, to make sure UConn can go in this time and actually compete, make it a closer ball game and maybe pull it out at the end? I mean, was Dorka Juhas the piece, in your opinion, that they were missing, or was just all around just South Carolina was too much to overcome?
It was a combination. South Carolina was fantastic all year. I mean, they really were the best team throughout the year. Mm-hmm. I think, every team has a weakness that can be exploited, but the way that it matched up with UConn, I don't think anyone, it's funny. I don't know that people, like you said, expected even UConn to make it to the final. And truth be told, UConn really didn't play their best game in the semifinal either. It's just that Stanford made some more mistakes, even though it was a good battle. Like, Stanford didn't play their best. As far as I'm concerned, the national championship was the worst game UConn played all season. They just looked completely disjointed, but there was a few reasons for that, and health being the primary one. Yeah. But nonetheless, South Carolina was they took care of business. Now, I think that the absence of Dorka 100% played a role. Yeah. Because when you take away one of those 6'5" bodies, that's big. Foul trouble was something that was really an issue all tournament. And it was something that Gino and the coaching staff really had to manage, understanding that fouls were going to come into play for Aaliyah Edwards and Olivia Nelson-Adota and whatnot. And so if you had Dorka there available, I think it takes some of those hard decisions out of the mix. And Dorka had a little bit of an up and down season. She definitely got better and better, but the way she can stretch the floor to be able to confidently knock down a 3-point shot is something that the other two, for instance, Olivia and Aaliyah, don't really have as much in their arsenal. They can shoot threes, but they're more hesitant to shoot threes. They're more likely to shoot the long two. So I do think that's part of it. And then looking ahead, I think the fact that she's returning, Dorka, is it gives a lot of stability to this roster because she's so experienced and mature. And I think Aaliyah has been underrated. Aaliyah Edwards, and she's just her physicality is really unmatched, and that's really the difference. And she plays great defense, and she can guard more out on the perimeter as well, even though she's big. I'm curious to see if we see more of an evolution of Amari DeBerry, if she is able to get some more minutes, because she did have some bright moments. When she did get in games, she wasn't afraid to attack and score, which I think is important. I think being aggressive is the number one thing. And at times, the lack of just straight up being aggressive hurt the Huskies. And then I am personally just stoked for the return of Aubrey Griffin. I think that we have not seen even close to her full potential realized. And last season, it was definitely a bummer that she just couldn't overcome the back issue, had to get surgery. But the fact that now she's going to have a full off season, she's had time to rehab and recover. I know that coming into last season, the coaches were really impressed with the summer that she had last year. Her growth, her training, and they were really hyped on her. And so we didn't get to see that come to fruition. And I hope we get to see that this year. Aubrey is, she is somebody, when I was talking about before, sort of that raw athleticism that can change the game at any moment because of that raw talent, because of those gifts that she has. And now that her basketball IQ is probably catching up a little bit to her body, I think it's going to be really fun to watch. And I'm just really looking forward to that return. So a lot of things to be excited about with this.
It is. Hey, and we definitely 100% want to get you back on here. We really apologize. We're on a time limit. We only have 2 minutes left.
That's all right. I talk a lot.
With that said,
no.
With that said, I mean, we definitely want to bring you back on. If you will agree with us as far as maybe be right before the regular season comes in, because again, we can't appreciate you enough for coming with us today. And hopefully this is just the beginning, Ryan, of getting to know Maria and talking lots and lots of UConn women's basketball with her.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, like Phil said, we can get you on before the regular season, or maybe sometime midway, or maybe before the March Madness tournament. So thank you again.
Thank you, guys. I hope we can make it work. I'm sure we'll figure something out, but I appreciate you following and covering this team. As you could tell, I love it, and you guys clearly love it too. So it's appreciated.
We'll be here for the long run. Yep. Listen Up, Maryland, presented by Dempsey's and Sports. And Maria, thank you so much, and good luck for the new 22-23 season.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Take care.